Hello to everybody here in the group. You're very, very welcome to this free book celebration of Mike Wilson's beautiful book, Portals into Deep Imagination, Celtic Mythology, Nature's Year and the Quest for Soul. So this is a beautiful book that I'm sure Michael will describe a little bit more about, and it's very much aligned with ecotherapeutic practices that we cover and support our students at the Tariki Trust. So we've got an hour, so I'll be very brief, and Mike will set us off with some introduction and a bit of explanation, and then a practice, and then we'll finish with a open discussion forum, Q&A perhaps. If you've got some direct questions for Mike, that's fine. So yes, I'll introduce Mike. He is a psychotherapist and a consultant. He's also an author of this magnificent book. I've been working weekly through it since Samhain, which is the end of October, what we would maybe call Halloween. And it works in that way. And Mike is originally via the UK CP member organisation of Humanistic Psychology, and has a very broad range of coaching, transpersonal psychology, environmental psychology experience. So this book is a culmination of many, many years of knowledge and practice, and it's a real delight that Mike is talking to us today about the book and about his own long experience. So you're absolutely very welcome, Mike, and I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you for that very warm and generous introduction. I think I'll just dive straight into the 20-minute presentation, and then followed by 10-minute practices, 10-minute practice session. Let me just upload my PowerPoint there. And thanks for the invitation. Of course, I'm just excited and nervous to be here at the same time, as I always am with events. So this is Loch An Eilean up in the Cairngorms, where I'm often walking around the edges of this loch. Some of you, many of you will know it. It's a beautiful setting. So this project, Portals into Deep Imagination, I guess it's the result of a lifelong passion into the relationship between psychology and Celtic myths, folklore, tales, but not only sort of academic psychology, but more, the Jungian type of psychology, the transpersonal psychologies. So that's where I'm coming from, as well as humanistic psychology. So let me just open the pages of the book for you. If I can do this on my, here it is. So the project is an interweaving of three strands. The first is the Celts, of what we know of the Celts. So I put Celts in inverted commas there because we don't really know a lot about the Celts, which is a wonderful thing for the project, for me at least, was because it allowed my imagination to dive into the stories and material and sort of imagine the Celts. And it gave me the freedom to imagine into a whole rich, wonderful, colorful, dangerous history, and reflect on themes and possibilities and perspectives on what some of these tales, or many of these tales, may offer the contemporary spiritual path walker, as I often refer to myself as. And with that, I've included some archaeology, some history, so some of what we know and a lot of what we can only speculate about. And that for me was a great joy. And then I've sort of braided that with in-depth psychology. This is psychology of Carl Jung and the transpersonal psychologies and humanistic psychology, and also the more academic, if you like, psychologies, with all those wonderful scientific papers that we can dip into and understand more about relationship of the mind and of our feelings and our bodies and our embeddedness in this world. And then the third braided aspect of the work is nature connection. And so this is where the practices in the work are sort of mostly embedded really in the nature connection. And sometimes I think of the work as as about enchantment, about the way we can give life to old stories so that we can begin to live them more fully, or awaken the gods and goddesses and other beings from the ancient world and somehow create a bridge between now and then, a bridge in the imagination and also a bridge through our practices. So there it is, the interweaving of three strands. And sometimes psychology leads, sometimes the Celts lead, and sometimes it's nature that leads. So that's the overall framing, if you like, of the work. And then in more detail, the work is divided into 8 sections, as you might imagine, each section beginning with a festival and followed by 6 or 7 weeks that are somehow related to the festival, but occasionally they take digressions into other areas linked to the time of year. The whole work begins at Samhain, which we'll all know about. And I thought long and hard about this. I thought, shall I begin with the beginning of the year that we're familiar with in our culture, which is the 1st of January? Or do I begin with, or shall I begin the project with the winter solstice? But eventually I settled on Samhain because I was interested then, as I am now, in what grows in dark places. So what is it we seed within ourselves that takes the dark winter months to germinate before it starts to show signs of possibility and potential? So that's why I started it at Samhain, but also I wanted the work to be out of sync with our most familiar time pattern, with our most familiar calendar that we often live our lives by. I wanted to, in a way, well, I did imagine that, we've got two feet, so we can walk on 2 paths simultaneously, the path of culture and the path of soul. And so beginning the project at Samhain, I imagined it as a soul pathway. And it seemed to make sense as I began working through the project that took me about 5 years from beginning to end. More if you count all the years I've been sort of thinking and reflecting on the themes and content. And so there we have it. The sections or chapters 1 to 8, and those are the titles. And each of the weeks in between these chapters have practices are followed by practices, but also readers can make their own practices up, or you may have practices and are likely to have practices that are more useful to you than the ones I'm providing. So my practices are really guidelines, if you like, for deepening into the journey and be deepening into the path that's there in front of you on the screen as you walk towards the moon and bathe in the moonlight. And so to give you some sort of more zoomed in perspective on the work, um, this is section 3, walking in the edgelands, or chapter 3, walking in the edgelands. And here we have the weeks. Week 14 beginning with Imbolc, and then the weeks unfold, followed by practices, contemplations, meditations, followed by practices, until we come to week 19. I was speaking to someone in America the other day, and they said they were in week 18, and then I was in week 19. So I have a conversation about, well, how do we know what week we're in? Well, sometimes it's clear from the festival that we're just passing through. So the festival is a gate or threshold into the weeks. And sometimes it's not so clear, but in a way that doesn't matter. Some people will be at week 18, and some will be at week 19. And I think the closer we get to the spring equinox, we can safely say we're in week 19. And I'll return to this week 19 a bit later on when we look at the practices, because one of the practices relates very much to week 19 and into the wild wood. And you can see the titles here. And this one then is chapter 4, how the titles somehow, they suggest the themes that we're taking a dive into. And then maybe even the practices that follow these themes. For example, week 26, imagination as a pathway to truth. That takes you deeper into imaginative practices to align more with a soul-centric path. So just moving on. And there go one more, I think, of these type of slides. This is week 5. So you can get this idea of sequence, reflecting on the mystery, then opens the door to Beltane, Fire Festival. And then you can see some of the themes are suggested of that festive time to do with generosity, hospitality, celebration, joy. And you see how the weeks are linked to the festive theme. One of the readings I will do later, quite shortly, in fact, is related to week 27. So we'll come back to that too in a moment. And so let's meet the deities and the She, Riders of the She by artist John Duncan. And there you get a real sense of these people. Some are very, very tiny. There's one on the ground that barely looks human, and others that look more the size of who we imagine people to be, and others very almost dwarf-like, wonderful figures there, colorful, radiant. And the She are the folk of the other world. The other world are those folk in Irish and Welsh is understood slightly differently. It could be who live within the hollow hills or under the earth, or at that level just between the earth and the under earth, or even below the waterline, where there are regions and kingdoms just as we have on the earth as we know it. And it's a mix of fairy people, the She, but also the gods and goddesses of a tribe of gods called the Duatha de Danann, who mythology tells us came to Ireland and then are now residing under some mountains in the west. But of course, different parts of Britain, Wales and Scotland and even England will have their own versions of these tales and the underworld. And from a psychological point of view, um, I'm viewing the underworld as the unconscious, so the world of dreams and the deep imagination, where the gods and goddesses also reside, in my view. Okay, so back to week 27. And this is one of the stories from that week, just to give you an idea how I'm using story, if you like. And this is, some of you will know, this is the tale of the dream of Angus. So the dream of Angus, he's the son of Boann, the Irish goddess of the river Boyne, and of the Dagda, Dagda being Angus's father. Um, and he meets the fire of inspiration in his dreams in the form of the beautiful Caer Ibermeath, which means Yewberry, goddess of dreams, who visits him at night for a year, often playing sweet music. And beguiled by love and unable to eat, Angus succumbs to a macerating illness. I'm reading from page 174 of my book. Succumbs to a macerating illness. Healing is only possible through love of the maiden who no longer frequents his dreams. A message goes out to the whole of Ireland to look for her as another year passes until a report comes that the goddess is at Loch Beldrakon, meaning Loch of the Dragon's Mouth, dragon of fire. Among 350s of young girls, 350s of young girls with golden hair who become swans, joined in pairs with silver chains. Only Caer Ibermeath wears a golden chain and a silver necklace, but Angus too must become a swan to be with her. Naturally, because he is also a shape-shifting god of youth, beauty, and love, he joins her. And thus they become a couple and fly away, and the music which emanates from them in flight renders anyone who hears it unable to sleep for 3 days and nights. And of course, telling the story at Beltane, then it would make sense when the next line I'm reading, marriage between them is only possible when she takes on human form for 1 day, and this day is at Samhain, 6 months away from Beltane. So in a sense, there's a story, and my invitation for you, if you can see the question at the top of the screen there, is if this tale were a dream that came to you, what would it mean? What might it mean? If this tale were a dream that came to you, what might it mean? And this is the way I'm approaching all the stories in the book, is to think of the stories as somehow presenting, coming to you as if they were a dream. So the idea of coming to you as a dream is a very Celtic idea, rather than what we often say is, I had a dream. So from this perspective, the dreams come to us. The dreams are entities in their own right. We don't have a dream, they come to us. And this is the view I'm taking in the work. And so for me, if this were my dream, I would say, well, the swan represents fidelity, commitment, loyalty, enduring love, transformation, inspiration, and soul making. And the time it takes between Beltane and Samhain, for me, represents the patience that it takes to follow something that's ignited deep within us, like a soul calling or a soul longing, something that fires us up, that we just have to follow. And once we start following, it somehow doesn't let us go. And so we follow in many ways blindly and in a type of faith. and trust that what we're following is worthwhile, which it seems to be in this tale. So let's just move then into the practices for the next 10 minutes. The 5 pathways model for nature connection. This practice, the 5 pathways model, arises from research done at the University of Derby. So it's sort of psychology rooted in that sense. And the pathways are, as you can see them there in front of you. These are pathways that are unique to all of us, and sometimes we connect with nature through one or all of them, or we have a preferred way, or just an unconscious, intuitive, natural way of connecting. And other ways, we find ourselves shifting our pathway of connection to give us a whole experience. So when, as we all know, when connecting with nature, we're not simply walking through. We're connecting, we're noticing, observing. And through the senses means that we allow ourselves, even now, as you look at the image on the screen, to allow your senses to mingle with the setting, one sense at a time, one sense at a time. And then emotion. What is the feeling of being in such a setting? And we just allow the feeling to reside and rest within us. And notice how the feelings come and go and change and move, a bit like the breeze through the trees. Everything's moving, including our emotions. And at other times, we find our way of connecting with nature through the beauty of a scene or a beauty of a person, the person of a tree, the person of a bird, the person of the voice of a bird, the person of a moving river, moving water. And at other times, it's through a pathway of compassion. And that's the love we have for the natural world that often prompts us then to take care of the natural world in other ways, either through activism or some other way. So those are the 4 of the main pathways. And then there's meaning. So when I was reading psychology at the University of Derby, I did a deep dive into this meaning pathway. And the developer of this model, Ryan Lumber, was my supervisor, and I was very lucky to have him as my supervisor on my work. And so the meaning pathway involves place connection. What the place means to us when we connect to it. Is it familiar, unfamiliar? Does it have a place memory? Is there a memory to the place? Does the memory of the place evoke a meaning for us? And also then metaphor and projections. What do the different aspects of nature mean for us? Is there a message in the solitary tree on the hill, or the primrose, or the glimpse of the wren, or the call of a hawk, or the sight of an adder, or the leaves falling from trees in autumn? Is there a meaning that seems to jump out at us from the scene? And so there's that sort of meaning-making process going on the metaphorical and symbolic level, and including when we project something into the scene, of whether it's something we're afraid of, or something we feel drawn towards, or something we love, or even something it reminds us of. And then all the while, in my suggestion, is a bi-directional communication. So nature is communicating with us, and we're communicating with nature. There's a two-way process going on. In some areas of transpersonal psychology, there's a sort of phrase, if I can remember it now, yes, participatory sort of engagement, where a feeling of soul connection, or a sense of a moment of wonderful, or an eureka moment, it comes from a meeting between the fox looking at you and you looking at the fox. It's as if there's a moment that happens between you, that the fox is also changed by the experience that you're also having, that you're not creating the experience. The experience is being co-created. That was the word I was looking for. Co-created by whoever else is in that nature setting with you. And then there's the notion within the meaning pathway of the magnitude of place as persons, the tree, a mountain, and the awe that it gives you, the hugeness of a mountain, the height of a tree in comparison to me, and the sense of awe that evokes, and that the feeling of awe arises from both the tree and the beholder. And of course, time, ancient stones, and where it takes us to in our imaginations of time and where we are on the whole timeline of life. And that's the meaning pathway. And then any of these experiences, if you like, any of these pathway connections invite this particular practice, which I use a lot in the work, in the book. So the practice is we're really slowing down and we're allowing the experience to sink into us, as if it's falling like the water on that waterfall there in this image. Imagine it sinking into us as we sink into it. And we can even do this looking at a picture. We don't always have to be in the natural world to do these practices. If it's pouring with rain, for example, we can look at a picture and we can still, by using the imagination, this is why I've called the book Portals into Deep Imagination. Through the use of imagination, we can just sink into the experience, allow the experience to sink into you as you sink into it. So it's top down, bottom up, or you could say left brain to right brain. It's the same thing. Allow the experience to sink into you as you sink into it, and just sit in that place of sinking or depth for about 20, 30 seconds is what psychology says is all you need for a transformation to begin to unfold. And then repeat the exercise or the practice, maybe twice in the next hour. And then we're in a way where we're keeping the mind open to the experience, so that the more we repeat the practice within a time frame, say 1 or 2 hours, we're creating new neural pathways in the brain. We're actually doing that as we engage with the practice. And then one final practice I want to share with you is this. It comes from the work of Carl Jung, and it's a practice of active imagination. And this is if we feel that we would like to work with a dream in the natural world. And this is one way of working with a dream in the natural world, so that we're walking into the natural world with the dream fresh in our minds. We may find ourselves walking with the dream while also speaking the dream out loud to ourselves. And then we just notice what's happening in the setting around us, whether there's a wren or a blackbird or a twig or a leaf that falls or a fish that leaps or whatever it is, or an atmosphere of place that we feel just drawn to something there in the distance, but we're not sure what it is. And just for maybe 15, 20 minutes, we enter into a type of dream mind state where we allow nature to communicate with us while we are immersed in a dream. And then from that, after 15 to 20 minutes, we just pause and we then think, was there anything from the experience right now that means anything to me? Is there anything from my experience right now that is a response to the dream? and that's the project. Um, Thanks for listening. I'm just going to stop and share right now, but invite you also to hold on to the space you're in. Just hold on to the feeling space you're in while I stop the share. See you in a minute. We're back. We're back. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Michael. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
So I share Mike's invitation to just let the feeling that you have in your body just be with it just for a few moments.
Mm. And then maybe following on for what Harry has just spoken, if anyone has a question or a thought, or maybe not even a question, but some other thought that comes to you, just feel free to bring it into the space.
I do. Hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was really lovely. And
Thank you, Selena.
hello. Yeah, I've been learning about Gaelic poetry, though I'm not a Gaelic speaker, sadly, though we used to speak it here in southwest Scotland, where I'm from and where I live. And I was much struck by the way that, in particular, trees are drawn into Gaelic poetry to represent people as well, you know, with sort of yew trees and oak trees being noble trees and alder trees being not very good trees. And so just listening to you speaking, you know, and talking about, you know, the Celtic gods and linking in with nature, it makes me have a deeper appreciation of the poetry itself, but also the way that people were more intimately connected to nature through poetry as well as through storytelling. So it's just making my head feel quite nice and rested and that. And we did a little series of poems that we did a little reading of in an exhibition of here in my hometown. And I wrote a poem about Elsa Craig, which I see from my window. And, you know, I was sort of thinking about the person being Elsa Craig, and you know the way you can write about it with cliffs that cannot be climbed, relating to the strength of an actual person. So I wanted to say thank you, Michael, for your
Mm.
talk and presentation. It's certainly got my brain ticking over, and I'm a Tariki Trust student, I should say.
Oh,
So
thank you,
really
Selena.
nice. Definitely going to go and buy the book now for sure.
Thank you. Lovely words.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued about the Celtic poetry that you're immersed in. Your words remind me of in the Irish Celtic tradition, and I think in all the Celtic traditions, the idea of a sacred tree. You know, it's there at the heart of those ancient communities. Um, and I'm remembering one of the anonymous Celtic poets writing that when a tree was felled,
Mm,
the tree had lost its ruler.
mm,
It lost the tree, the place had lost its nobility
yeah,
when the tree was lost, and people were therefore lost too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here where I live, there's still very much the tradition of planting a rowan tree at the entrance to your property, and woe betide anybody who cuts that tree down. If they do, death will follow them. You know, it isn't just about keeping the idea of witches away. It actually confers protection on your property and on
Mm.
the family that live within the boundary of that property. And my 70-year-old rowan's succumbed now; it's dying. But my next door neighbour has her rowan. You know, it's still happening now. and I'm quite anxious now that my tree's dying. Do I need to do some sort of ceremony, because there is this linkage, like you say, with it. The tree is very much a living being.
Yeah, I love that story. And I imagine then, as a tree was in its process of decline, it seeded itself everywhere. And you may find one somewhere in the garden tucked away
Oh, I hope so. Yes,
to
thank you.
live another 120, 50, 60 years.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Miss.
And a wonderful tree of protection it is, isn't it? With its bright red berries. And there's a story, a lovely story that I can't remember the whole detail of in the book, surrounded, I think it's week 6 actually, about the rowan and the dragon that sleeps at the rowan's roots, and woe betide anyone who tries to chop that tree down.
Wow, wonderful.
Mm.
I like, Selena, how you query about ceremony. Actually, that may be quite resonant within your book, Mike. Is there more that you can say about ceremony and ritual, perhaps, that can
Mm.
you can share?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I suppose ceremony is about coming into relationship with other, isn't it, in some way? It's about whether the other is the moon or the sun or any other aspect of the natural world. It's about coming into deep relationship. And the actions in ceremony and ritual, I think, is that language that we use that we don't use in any other on any other occasion. Um, it's a type of sacred language, and it involves our whole bodies, not just our thoughts. And um, and I just love that whole notion of the rituals we make. Sometimes also the rituals that we're given, but the rituals we make in particular that come from some deep soul-centric place within us that we spontaneously want to bow or sprinkle water or leave a stone or create a circle, um, or many other things, limitless things that we can do, are ways of um, creating relationships with otherness, and that otherness includes the invisible world too. I really believe that, and I know many of us will too in this space here this evening. That there's those relationships we forge with the other world, and when I'm thinking of other world, I'm thinking about the unconscious. So that it's both. It's not all outside of us. It's also inside of us, simultaneously, together at the same time.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
Can I go next?
Please do, Laz.
Hi, my name is Laz, and I'm living here in New York City.
Hello, Laz.
Thank you. And this is so interesting because I have found this on Eventbrite, and I signed up for it, not knowing much about it, really, not knowing much about it. And then I'm in here, and I can't believe, because I have family that came from the north of Spain, Asturias, which they have Celtic up there, and Galicia. And I wasn't born there. I was actually born in Cuba. But, my family came to Cuba for some, reasons. And so I visited there as a child. I haven't been back, but I do have cousins that I speak to all the time. And so 2 days ago, I was in an art class because I take classes, a lot of art classes on Zoom. And I had been to the Carl Jung Center in Manhattan. And, I love the process of doing artwork through the lens of Jungian psychology. And so 2 days ago, I was in this art class, and someone chose to do Celtic roots and Celtic imagery within a mandala. And so I decided to, I don't know, it was just like there was a little gap in the between, and I was like, I went in and Googled Northern Spain's Celtic roots, because honestly, I don't know as much about it as I would like to. And I found a wonderful article that gave me a lot more information than I ever had. And I just think like there's this circular thing, right, that happens that, like Mike said, in dreams, for instance, that we didn't have a dream, the dream came to us. Sometimes also these type of things come to us, you know, an awareness or like an interest in something. So like your book, like how would I ever know about your book, really, you know? They closed a lot of Barnes and Nobles in my area, so so somehow it finds us, right? This information finds us, and I think that's just remarkable.
Mm. Thank you, Laz. I'm just thinking of your connection with Spain and the Celts. The Celts there sort of somehow flows in our DNA, doesn't it?
I guess, yes.
Flows in our DNA. And what you're describing there reminds me of Jung's idea of synchronicity, where something of an unconscious process within us connects with something more conscious outside of us, in a way, or put it another way, where something within us seems to link in some meaningful way with something outside of ourselves that seems at first glance unrelated. And there's that moment of wonder, or a moment where something of the mystery seems to break through, and we're left with a sense of what just happened then. I've suddenly been brought to something, or something's been brought to me, that has a deep meaning in it that I'm still trying to puzzle out even after all this time.
Hmm.
You know, the idea of synchronicity
Yes, yes, I'm aware of that. And the mystery too.
and the mystery, yeah,
The mystery, yeah.
the mystery.
And I don't know, but trees come to me because here in New York City, in the area where I live, we have northern deciduous forests.
Mm.
The same in the north of Spain where I'm speaking of. I don't know about Ireland and you know the other areas, but definitely there's some magnet that pulls us to something,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, and that's, in my thinking at least, and maybe others too, um, so often worth trusting in, trusting the magnet that we feel is pulling us at some level, not always conscious, but we somehow where we feel compelled to follow. And that is the story of the dream of Angus. He was compelled to follow. This figure came to him in a dream and then appeared at the bottom of his, at the foot of his bed, but still in a dream state, and he was compelled to follow. And it's a sort of soul-centric pull, a soul-centric journey, I think that we're all on when we're living our busy lives that encourage us to locate ourselves more in egocentric identity. But there's another identity as well below the surface of awareness, from a Jungian and transpersonal perspective, at least. And we all know that, you know, ego is not a structure; it's only a process. And so by taking deep dives into the imagination, whether it's through divination or through ritual or through imagining the myths and stories of the Celtic world, we create what I call ego porosity. Ego porosity. We create a transparency of our more familiar identity so that some other bigger, more lasting identity can break through. So thank you, Laz, for pulling that out of me. I didn't
Thank
realize
you
I was
so
going
much
to
for
say
telling
those
me. I do
words.
want to read your book because I'm just fascinated now.
Mm,
It's almost like parts of us that we don't know yet, and
mm,
and have an opportunity to to go further and search, or just be open for that to come to me.
Mm-hmm. Openness, yeah.
Yeah, I think when I do artwork, in imagery, I do receive some beautiful images, and I don't do active imagination enough. I don't ask, why are you here? What are you trying to tell?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is something very Jungian. I don't do it
Mm-hmm.
as, and sometimes, it's like, why on earth did that image come up? It's kind of scary or kind of ugly, or, so it's like something I have to pay more attention to.
Yeah, and I guess, for many of us, myself included, the images appear without the questions. They just appear, as if the images don't need the question to be present. They just come,
They just come.
just like dreams come.
Mm.
Mm,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Laz, thank you so much for your insight, and Mike for your reflections on that. It's beautiful to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have a comment or a question, something that they'd like to share about what they've heard? Bearing in mind that part of the Celtic way of knowing is about letting things steep and not rush to conclusions and left brain, idealism and dominance over conclusions. So if we are in silence, then that silence is rich and necessary. So it is very welcome as well.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, Mike, if you can talk a little bit more about quite a powerful and seemingly very reassuring statement that you made,
Okay.
that these experiences maybe only need 20 or 30 seconds for transformation to unfold.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit more to us? Some of us are in training or have been through training, but as people, as everyday people who may be able to practice what you've suggested, what do you mean by that, and how can we know that transformation has happened or is beginning?
The idea of 20 to 30 seconds comes from neurobiology and the research that has been done that's used MRI scanners and other engineering, if you like, just to measure what's happening in the brain or when we're paying attention to something or thinking in a particular way. So it arises from the research done in neurobiology. And the view is that it doesn't take a lot of effort to bring about change in our mind, let's call it that. And the mind, of course, as we know, is in the whole body, not just in the brain, and may even somehow reside outside of the brain, as the field of consciousness studies, which I also trained in my second degree in psychology, would suggest that consciousness isn't something that's limited in our head, and not even limited within our body. And so this notion of 20 to 30 seconds, it comes about through the research into what it takes for the mind to begin to set another pathway, one of thousands and millions of pathways of having, moving about in our physical brains simultaneously. The time it takes to set something else in motion. a new thought or feeling. So sink into you while you sink into it. It's creating a felt experience. So change happens at a feeling level more than a cognitive one. Although change at a cognitive level also occurs and can be effective, but the most effective change in our lives is through is through our emotional world. So when we're dropping into, allow this the feeling to drop into you as you sink into it, drop or sink, and we can create our own imagery for this, whether it's the waterfall or or water on blotting paper or on a sponge or water or ink in water, the way ink sinks into water. So we create our own image for it. So we use the mind and the imagination to help create the image and the feeling and the felt experience. And so as that is sinking into us, we can feel it. So our feeling is the measure that something is changing in this moment, given that nothing is constantly, nothing is static anyway, as a given. But so the feeling is an indication that something is moving, something is changing. And when we repeat the practice, we somehow endorse it. We back it up with more of the same. And it sets in motion a new growth pathway in the brain. And we know that. A more, if you like, if you say not, I don't want to say, well, I suppose I could say for the moment advanced or next level up way of doing this practice would be to, if you can also bring to mind a less preferred feeling, one that you would like to transform. So you are having, in a moment, you're experiencing a sense of connection and a sense of real well-being in the moment. Just bring to mind very slightly a feeling of the opposite of that for you, a feeling of irritation or annoyance or feeling less connected, and link it to, in your thinking, link it to the feeling of connection. So it's like you allow the less preferred feeling touch the new preferred feeling, unconnected, connect it back, unconnected. I haven't written about this in the book, but it's also comes from neurobiology. And it's how we allow something less preferred to enter into the orbit of the new preferred cultivated experience. Or we might say, if we're in the natural world, the experience that nature gives us in that moment that we want to absorb and create more of. And then we link it to some other feeling in our mind that we would like to transform. So what happens at a neurobiological level is the newfound preferred experience develops and is not changed by the less preferred. But the opposite happens. When we experience the less preferred again in our daily life, it has locked into it the new memory. You see that the new preferred experience becomes tagged into the less preferred. But there's some other layers to it as well, but I can say briefly in 30 seconds that as long as the less preferred isn't bigger in magnitude or shape or feeling size as the one you're cultivating, there needs to be some sort of match. at a psychological level, a sort of match. But to come back to your question, Harry, I hope I've answered it, but it's that sort of feeling of it is rooted in science, and the 20, 30 seconds really is all we need to do to create something. It's not about effort, it's about repetition.
Yes, and I like what you said about going back to it as well. There's the practice aspect, returning back, paying attention to this new relationship between the new feeling, the old feeling.
That's right.
The third has emerged, and
Third,
that's
exactly.
then cultivating that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really appreciate that. Thank you. It's very clear,
Yeah.
and it feels very relatable for me, and perhaps very, very clear to understand that neurobiology is actually in a felt sense, which is familiar.
Yeah. And one of the great teachers of this, of course, is a person called Rick Hansen, who wrote a work called Buddha's Brain. A lot of this is in there. And you know, so it's I'm not making it up, in other words.
Just before we close, I wonder if there's any other comments or conclusions that anybody would like to draw. Caroline, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I'd like to thank you, first of all, very much for the presentation. I was just musing on that last point that you were making about repetition. And I was thinking about the relationship between repetition and cycles, because, of course, a lot of what you've been talking about is cycles. And it does seem to me that these cycles are very powerful in creating the conditions for mental change and so on. But equally, they can hold us in certain positions, which might be for good or bad. So I don't know. I haven't come to any conclusions on it, but I think it's interesting, the whole role of repetition and the importance of it.
I agree.
And its relationship to nature. It's not just something
Yeah.
internal, it's something external.
Yeah, yes.
Mm.
In a way, a bit like meditation, I think. I often think the more we practice, the more it becomes part of us, in a way. I'm looking in there, Harry, in the chat, just briefly. I see a comment from Jay and the work of Martin Shaw, Liturgies into Wild. Until this week, I've never come across his work, and I just immediately had to order all his books. So he's an extraordinary writer. I don't know how I missed his work. And thanks, Linda, and thanks, Olivia, too. And coming back to you, Caroline, yes, I there is something in that cyclical process of repetition. And we do know from psychology that the repetition creates lasting change, and and preferably if it's repetition in our favor, because we can also repeat things not good for us, and that also brings about the change.
Yes.
And that the change, the cyclical process of repetition, and what it then, and how it somehow how it moves. It passes through the whole brain, not just the part that's thinking. All the regions of the brain are interconnected, and everything is interconnected into the nervous system as well. So everything passes through the whole body.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you for everybody for being here and for the beautiful, insightful thoughts and comments in the chat as well as live. I've just put into the chat tomorrow's another book celebration at 1:00 UK time with Olivia Sprinkle, Listening to the Trees, Stories, Science and Soul. So please come along to that. Again, that's also free. Just want to thank you, Michael, for your wisdom and your wonderful delivery. It's just been a joy to spend an hour with you and learning from you. So thank you again, everybody. And thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Sorry, Harriet, can I just correct? I don't think Olivia's workshop tomorrow is free.
Oh,
We had,
it's not. That's not
we had
the.
her book launch a few weeks ago, which was free. This is a workshop, so
That's the
apologies
workshop.
to anyone who's.
Deep apologies if you book it and ask for some money. I'm sorry. That's my fault. So yes, and it might be sold out. So I'm not doing a very good job of marketing Tariki Trust events. I apologise, but thank you anyway.
There's a wait list. So do you know how much it is?
I
Workshop?
don't. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So is this your organization is?
Tariki Trust.
Yes. What is it?
It's well, Caroline, would you like to explain?
Yes, Tariki Trust, we're a UK-based charity, and we're Buddhist-based, but very broad in terms of spirituality, and we particularly are interested in our relationship with the environment, and particularly we run an ecotherapy training program, and we offer other workshops and sessions like this book launch or this book talk. And yes, we have a variety of things on. You'll find us if you go to our website. I'll put the website in the chat
There you
line.
go.
Great. And we also have an Eventbrite page with all the events on it. So you'll find the range of things. So you can either come to individual workshops or you can sign up for our certificate program, which is a year-long certificate in ecotherapy. And we do a range of other things as well. So
Well,
Thank
thank you again. Yes, thank you. And take care, everybody, and we'll see you soon in some capacity, I'm sure. So thank you very much, everybody.
Bye bye.
Thank you
Farewell.
very much.
Blessings. Bye bye now.